Okay, welcome back, gentlemen, and gentlemen includes the ladies, naturally. So, this is now case number 3. It's a simple case as promised because we are in the section about simple cases. So, customer Carl simply is from Cologne. He enters a grocery in Cologne and buys 1 kilogram potatoes and 1 bottle of Coca-Cola or another brand of Coca-Cola. You can just imagine whatever you like. We are not going to do any marketing and advertisements for any special brand here. So the question is simple: treatment under German VAT law. And now, until now, we have been a bit inaccurate because I just told you the master solution, but there are two things which we should improve. First, we should always make a sketch of what happens, and second, we should naturally look up the parts of the law which are relevant for our solution. And so this is something which we are going to do just now. Okay. So the first thing which we should do now is just think about the sketch what happens, and let's here think about, here's the customer in Cologne, and we have here, and this is not the customer in Cologne but the seller, owner of grocery, and also that guy is in Cologne, and the one sells something to the other. And now let's have a check. Usually we have the entrepreneur on the left side and the customer on the right side, and we see we did it exactly the wrong way, so we have to interchange that. Sorry, that was not the right thing to do. Customer from Cologne and the seller is from Cologne too. Why do we do this way? Well, you need to know that you should present every situation which happens in a kind of a standard form. Okay, now we have another thing which we can detect. There is buying 1 kilogram of potatoes and 1 bottle of Coke. So this is not one transaction, these are two transactions. And well, we have to take that into account too. So number one is the potatoes. Number one is probably a bit better. Here you see potatoes. And transaction number two is the bottle of Coke. So two things which we have to deal with, and well, let's just begin with the first one. So transaction number one, selling potatoes 1 kilogram. The first question which we have to ask here is naturally again taxability. To test is, well, here we just need to remember the list of all the taxable transactions under German law, and well, it's very simple. You remember that was in paragraph 1.1, and as we now promised to look it all up, let's have a look to 1.1 in order to check it. And in order to check these things, we take our TaxAct slide translations. You remember these? I even placed them on the internet so that you can look them up. So what we need is the USDG translation, and there we need for paragraph 1. So So paragraph 1, and here we are. Taxable transactions or deliveries of goods and services which an entrepreneur acting within the range of his enterprise performs in the inland for consideration. That's number 1. Number 4 is the importation of goods from third territories into the inland, and number 5 is the so-called intra-community acquisition. We can see that number 4 and 5 do not come into the question here, so what we have to check indeed is, as always, 1, number 1. And so we need to check if our seller is an entrepreneur, if it's within the range of his enterprise activities, what happens, if he performs the delivery or service in the inland, and if it's a delivery of a good or a service. So that is our program. And so we just can make a note that to test is number 1, and then go to the different criteria. So the test is paragraph 1, number 1. That was what we found out just immediately. And let's begin with those criteria, which are the easiest ones, is the acting person an entrepreneur. And there we have to find out what has to be tested now. So let's look again to the TaxAct slides. We seem to remember, I think, that this was in paragraph 2, section 1, sentences 1 and 3, USTG. So let's look up there what they say and if it applies. Well, here let's look for paragraph 2. And here we have it. The entrepreneur is everyone who performs a business activity independently, so without a boss, on his own behalf and in his own name. And sentence 3 says a business activity is every sustainable activity, so sustainable on a constant basis, with the intention to generate revenue. So that's it. And the second sentence, there we can also have a look to already. That is, the enterprise comprises the entire business activity of the entrepreneur. That means everything he does as an enterprise. That is, first, what makes up the core business of his enterprise, but also other occasional activities which are combined with the enterprise activity. So everything is literally everything combined with the business activities. So let's apply these small sentences to our case and find the consequences here. What we find out is the seller is an entrepreneur because, excuse me please, the owner of the shop is independent, so not employed, aims at revenue, and acts on a constant or sustainable basis. Also, within the enterprise, the answer here is a clear yes. Selling potatoes is part of the core business of a grocery shop owner. 2.1 sentence 2 USTG says that. It would also be a part of the enterprise activities if it were just an occasional additional activity, so that it's a core business activity does not really count. What matters is that there is a connection to the business activities, and if it's even the main object of the business activities, that is a clear case. Is it done for consideration? Yes. Asks for the price. So the next thing we have to find out, is it a delivery of a good? If we sell potatoes and we assume, suppose, and do everything similar, that it is a delivery of a good, but we will have to check this. Let's have a look to that part of the law which tells us if it is a delivery of a good. So let's have a small look there. Yeah, the nice definition of deliveries and services can be found in paragraph 3 of the German USTG. And 3.1 says the deliveries of a good by an entrepreneur are activities by which he or someone else in his name enables the customer or someone else acting on behalf of the customer to dispose about the good in his own name, so that what is meant is a transfer of economic ownership or transfer of control, however you call it. And this can be answered with a clear yes. Goods, potatoes are tangible goods. Goods are tangible goods. And if you sell them, you transfer ownership, the possibility to do with the potatoes whatever you like, to behave as an owner is able to behave. That is defined as the transfer of economic ownership, or that is defined as a delivery. So we have a delivery here. Okay, let's write it down. Yes, it is a delivery of a good. 3.1 USDG potatoes is goods, and selling is transfer of ownership or transfer of position like an owner. That is how it's explicitly defined in the German guidelines issued by the administration. Now the last thing we need to find out for 1.1 number 1 is if it is attributed to the inland that transaction. For this we have to test the place of delivery, and there are two kinds of basic rules there. The first basic rule is for deliveries which were made when the good is moved during the delivery, then the place is where the movement of the good towards the customer begins. And the other case is where there is no movement of the good during delivery. And in these cases, the place is 3.7, where the good is at the moment when ownership changes. Now, as we see it here, our customer goes to the grocery and takes the goods at the beginning. Starting point here, where the goods begin to move, is the shop, and the end, where the goods arrive later, is at home of the customer. So just to mark this, beginning and end, beginning and end of the movement of the good is both in Cologne. But there is a movement of the good, and so that's a clear thing, which we see here. We need to apply paragraph 3.6. I think it's sentence 1, and the rule should be where the movement of the good towards the customer begins, or towards or by the customer, or to the customer by the seller, whatever it is, and this should be here Cologne. But I did this now from my memory, and you should never trust your memory, especially when you have in mind that you probably hope to become 95. So exercise and practice not to trust your memory already when you are younger. And so let's have, just to be on the safe side, a look into 3.6 of the German VAT Act. And indeed, here we have 3.6, sentence 1. You see that small number here, that's sentence 1 of 3.6. If a good which is delivered is dispatched by the supplier, by the customer, or someone else who acts on behalf of one of those two, then the place of delivery is always there where the dispatching or the sending of the goods, so where the transport towards the customer begins. Then some other sentences follow which regulate details: what is a transport by the customer, what is regarded as transport by the seller. All that is completely unnecessary. or nearly, because the basic rule is here and the other things only explain details, which play no role in most cases. So indeed, we remembered the rule correctly, where the place of delivery is where the movement towards the customer begins. That is in the grocery in Cologne, and that is in the inland. So let's write that down. So Cologne is in the inland. That's paragraph 1, 2, sentence 1. Now, just please believe me that. So everything of taxability was fulfilled. So taxable transaction in Germany. Now the next step is number 2, is there a tax exemption? To check is paragraph 4 USDG tax exemptions. The prognosis is there will be none, because we have never seen potatoes which have been sold tax-free. We might take a glance just to be sure, and we do that just now. So here we have paragraph 4, and exportation tax-free. No, these potatoes are not exported. Inter-community deliveries, no. Cross-border transactions, transportation of goods, blah blah, and delivery of gold to central banks, something which is sold into particular warehouses or other things, deliveries after or before, blah blah. Brokering transactions, no. Delivery of food or drink for immediate consumption during a transport on a boat between an inland sea harbor and a sea harbor abroad, no. Financial transactions, selling real estate property, no. Services on grounds of an insurance contract, no. Special activities as an agent for a so-called Bausparkasse, a special kind of savings bank, no. Number 12, letting real estate property for rent, no. For number 14, medical treatment of humane medicine, no. So all is a no here. So does not apply. You can be pretty sure. As you see, my translations left out some cases, but they were not important. So liable for tax. Okay. So what comes after question 2? Question 3, tax base. Well, usually paragraph 10, 1 sentence 1, 2, the net amount. And the net amount is all what the seller receives. And that is here, €2, at the gross amount, minus the VAT amount included therein. And then that is the net amount. And let me just guess, potatoes will be 7% under the reduced rate. So the net amount will be €2 divided by 107%. And what comes out is then €186.9. Oh, 186. And now, what about number 4? But we have again made the same mistake, but we have taken the same risk as before. We trusted our memories, and so let's first have a look still to 10 if it's really correct what we did here. Yes, here it is. The tax base for deliveries and services is the consideration of net amount. The consideration is everything which the entrepreneur gets or has to get in return for the transaction, either from the recipient or from somebody else than the recipient, including the subsidies which are directly connected to the price, but without the VAT amount of VAT which is owed under the law for this transaction. So that's a bit complicated, but that is exactly what we had used as a formula just before. Okay. Then we can perhaps also have a look to make sure that potatoes is 7%. And for this reason, let's look for paragraph 12 already. 12.2. The tax is reduced to 7% for the following transaction: the delivery, importation, or intra-community acquisition of all the goods listed in supplement 2 to this tax act, with the exception of certain goods listed at the end. And now we will have to find out if indeed potatoes are in supplement 2. So let's look a bit. And here is now supplement 2. And in the list is living animals as follows. So then follow the list of animals which are recognized as serving human nutrition, so which are for food purposes: flesh, milk, and products from milk, flowers. Then we have vegetables, plants, roots, bulbs, which are used for nutrition, namely potatoes. Here it is. So number 10, letter A of supplement 2 is the proof that potatoes is 7%. So now we know that and can use it for our master solution. Paragraph 12.2, number 1 plus supplement 2, number 10, letter A, potatoes are taxed with 7% only. So 7% on 186, that is, or 186.9, so rather 180. 7% is 13 cents. Euro, sorry. So that's the tax which is due, and then we come to the formalities, how the tax is paid. And you remember the tax payer, that was the pay in the P in paid. That's the seller, the entrepreneur. Paragraph 13a, 1, number 1 is the respective source. The arisal of the tax is at the end of the preliminary declaration period. That is the month usually during which the delivery is made. Paragraph 13.1, number 1, letter A of the USDG. The invoicing is, as always, the same as always, no peculiarities, declaration duties, nothing special. Peculiarities, nothing. Input tax claims, the seller can keep or claim, whatever it is, the input tax from the purchase of the potatoes from the wholesaler. Okay. This also should be looked up if we cited the right sources. So let's have a small break to do just the checking here. So 13a, the taxpayer. Indeed, the rule was, in case of paragraph 1.1, number 1, the entrepreneur is the taxpayer. And then we need to go to paragraph 13, when the tax arises, and the tax arises for deliveries and services if the taxes are to be determined according to amounts agreed upon, so before they are paid, but when the transaction is made, at the end of the preliminary declaration period in which the delivery of service is made. Yes, we remembered that correctly, and so our solution is indeed correct. We can be satisfied there. Okay, now transaction number 2. Selling the bottle of Coke. We have again first taxability again. To test is paragraph 1, number 1 USDG. Because numbers 4 and 5 do not apply, we can be reasonably sure of that. So we have again the entrepreneur and the seller is an entrepreneur. See above, he didn't retire in the meantime. Within the scope of the enterprise activities, yes, selling drinks, bottles of Coke is part of the business of a grocery food shop. So paragraph 2, 1, sentence 2 applies, is fulfilled. For consideration, yes, on the price. That's it. Now, is it a delivery? Yes, the bottle is a tangible good, and selling it a transfer of ownership. Is it in the inland? For this, you have to look to the place of delivery, and here you again have a delivery with movement of the good. The good is not left in the shop. 3, 6, sentence 1. I hope you remember that, where the movement of or the transport of the good towards the customer, or to the customer begins. This is cologne in the shop. That's in the inland. So the whole affair is taxable under paragraph 1, number 1 USDG. Number 2, is there a tax exemption? We have to check paragraph 4, and we never heard about a tax exemption for Cokes. This does not apply. If you look through again the whole paragraph 4, you can be sure nothing applies. We don't do it now because we did it just now before, but in an exam or a real case we would do it. Now we are relatively sure, we are sure it's liable to tax, so we have to pay tax. So we need the tax base. That's again the consideration or the net amount, however to be translated, or what the seller receives. That's here €1.50 minus the VAT included therein. This is now a 19% transaction, so VAT included is 19 out of 119%, and the net amount is therefore 150 divided by 119%, and this is €1.26. The tax rate and tax amount, well, paragraph 12.1, it's 19% because paragraph 12.2 does not apply. Paragraph 12.2 very often applies to food, but very rarely to drinks. Coffee only in the poor people's version of coffee powder. Tea only in the dry variant, so not hot and prepared for consumption. Milk is 7%, but nearly everything else is 19%. So here 19% and 19% out of, well, on this, that's 24 cents. And we have again the taxpayer, that's again the entrepreneur. So the guy is called seller 13.1, number 1 USDG. We have the tax arisal at the end of the preliminary declaration period during which delivery was made. Here we have no data on that. The rule is 13.1, number 1 USDG. Invoicing and declaration duties, nothing special. So peculiarities, also nothing special. Input tax claims, input tax situation. Seller can keep, does not lose the input tax from the purchase of the bottle from the wholesaler. Paragraph 15.1 or so. That's it. Now this second solution has been presented in a far more quick way that shows you, if you are well trained, how quickly you can solve such a small case. But until you are so familiar with the legal rules, you should do what we did in the first half. So always look them up in the translation of the tax acts, or if you are able to understand German, then even in the original version of the Value-Added Tax Act, the Umsatzsteuergesetz of Germany. Okay, that's it for this time. Thank you for listening, or thank you for watching. And I hope it helped you a bit, showed you how cases can be done. You should remember, especially when we have to do with the delivery of a good, it is a good idea to do this, what I did here, to mark the beginning, here it is, and the end of the transport of the good towards the customer. Because that is something which, when we get used to it, is really helpful later in more complicated cases. So please get used to doing this exactly now. Here, the places where the guys live, Cologne. This is rather an additional information which is not always needed, but it's helpful to write it down on the sketch. So you should please remember that is also very helpful to note down where the people involved have their residence, although you mostly don't need it for the solution of the case, but it's helpful for your brain to keep things apart. Because where people live, where the delivery starts is not always the same. Where people live and where the delivery ends, this is also not always the same. So noting down these things at different places trains your brain to keep these things apart. Thank you very much for this time. It would be nice to see you again for the next exercise case. Till then, thanks and goodbye.